Some stories stay with you forever, whether you want them to or not. They bury themselves in the corners of your mind, resurfacing in the quiet moments, reminding you how close you came to losing everything. This is one of those stories. It takes me back more than 30 years to when I was in my early 20s. Back then, I worked as a burlesque entertainer in a gentleman's club. It wasn't glamorous the way outsiders might imagine. It was smoky, dimly lit, filled with the smell of cheap cologne, sweat, and stale alcohol. Nights blurred together. Strange men came and went, but every now and then someone would stand out. That night, I noticed a couple, a man and a woman. They weren't loud, they didn't draw attention, but something about the way they watched made me remember them. Still, it wasn't unusual for couples to come in, so I thought little of it. A few days later, the doorman handed me a folded piece of paper. 2 names, 2 numbers, Laura and Richard. He said they wanted me to call. I dialed Laura's number. She sounded polite, warm even. She said she and her partner Richard had been at the club and thought I'd be perfect for a role in a movie Richard was producing. She spoke with the kind of confidence that made everything sound believable. "You have a presence," she told me, "a kind of spark. We just know you'd be perfect." I was 22, hungry for something bigger than myself. To hear the word movie was intoxicating. So when she asked if I'd be open to a meeting, I didn't hesitate. Of course I said yes. The next evening at 7, Richard pulled up in his Jeep. I had dressed carefully, white lace with ostrich feather trim, something that would make me look like I belonged on a screen. He smiled, introduced himself smoothly, and I climbed in. He suggested we stop by his place first so he could grab some contracts. That was the first red flag. But at the time, I brushed it off. Why would I suspect anything? I wanted to believe this was my big break. When we got to his house, he left me sitting in the car, disappearing inside. Minutes passed. The street was quiet, the house dark, except for one window glowing faintly upstairs. Finally, he came back out, manila folders tucked under his arm, and an open bottle of beer in his hand. "This is for you," he said casually, handing it toward me. The label glistened in the light. My throat went dry. Something in my gut told me not to take it. I laughed nervously and set it down in the Jeep's window well, saying something about not drinking in cars. He didn't press, just smiled. But that smile, it didn't look right. We drove to a bar I knew. Inside, he ordered drinks and laid out scripts and contracts. They looked official enough. He talked about actors I could meet, sets I could visit. He made it all sound real. Too real. But there was a strange undercurrent in his charm. It was too polished, too rehearsed, like lines from a role he'd played many times before. At one point, I excused myself to call my boyfriend from the payphone in the back. I carried my drink with me, because the older girls at the club had drilled it into me. Never leave your glass unattended. When I came back and told Richard I had to leave, his face changed. The warmth slipped. His eyes narrowed, and he leaned forward, almost pleading. "You're making a mistake. You could meet Mickey Rourke tonight. You could come see the set. Do you understand the opportunity you're walking away from?" I forced a smile, thanked him, and stood firm. Finally, he handed me his card. I walked away that night, never calling again. I thought that was the end of it. Months later, the police showed up at the club. They weren't there for a drink. They carried 2 thick binders of mugshots and a stack of Polaroids. The air shifted instantly. We all knew something terrible was coming. They told us about a predator couple, people who posed as producers, promising dancers roles in films before drugging and assaulting them. When they slid the mugshot books across the bar, my hands trembled as I flipped through the pages. And then I froze. Richard and Laura, clear as day. Then came the Polaroids. The images were like a punch to the gut. Women sprawled out, drugged and lifeless, their eyes half open but empty. Richard's face appeared in some of them, Laura's in others. They looked almost proud, as if the photographs were trophies. My heart sank when I recognized a few of the women, friends, dancers I had laughed with, shared dressing rooms with, women who never showed up to work again, who I had thought had simply moved on. Now I knew the truth. There were many more I didn't recognize, far too many. Richard was arrested and convicted. Laura, shielded by her family's wealth, cut a deal and testified against him. She walked free. For years, I tried to forget. I tried to bury it. But then, 12 years after his conviction, I saw his name in the paper. Richard was up for parole. My blood went cold. I sat down and wrote a letter to the parole board detailing every detail of my encounter. I begged them not to let him out, because I knew the truth. Men like him don't change. They wait, they watch, and they strike again. Sometimes, late at night, I think back to that Jeep, to the open beer he placed in my hand. If I had taken one sip, I wouldn't have made it to the bar. I would have been another nameless girl in a stack of Polaroids, my body captured in those grotesque, frozen moments. I was lucky, too lucky. So I tell this story as a warning. Watch your drinks, listen to your instincts, because evil doesn't always come snarling with fangs. Sometimes it comes smiling, dressed as opportunity, carrying contracts and promising fame. And sometimes it's sitting right across the table from you. Crimes have a way of leaving shadows in our memory, shadows that grow darker the more we try to forget them. Before I tell you what happened, let me set the stage. This was about 10 years ago. At the time, I was a young gay man living in a mid-sized city, restless and searching for connection in a dating scene that felt more like a trap than a chance for love. Most people like me relied on apps and websites. They were our secret underworld, hidden promises, fleeting encounters, and behind every profile, the question of whether the person on the other side was real, safe, or dangerous. I checked them daily, sometimes out of boredom, sometimes out of loneliness, but I rarely actually met anyone. Something always stopped me. The fear of disease, of theft, of waking up to a nightmare instead of a fantasy. But then came the ad on Craigslist. Just a short, simple post from a man slightly older than me. He wanted exactly what I wanted. A casual night with someone his age. Maybe drinks, cuddling, and whatever else might follow. It felt harmless, even normal, almost inviting. We exchanged texts for a month. Harmless, playful, warm. Not once did I sense danger. Finally, I asked if he wanted to meet. He agreed without hesitation. His place was about 10 miles out of the city, quiet, isolated, far from the safety of familiar streets. That night, as I drove, the sun sank lower until the world was painted in shadows. At 6 p.m., the roads already felt empty, swallowed by the dusk. He texted me that he was walking home from a friend's house and asked me to pick him up. I spotted him on the side of the road. He carried a massive speaker, his hood pulled tight around his face despite the warm weather. Something about that image unsettled me. The road was desolate, dusty, nearly dirt, with scattered trailers here and there like broken teeth in the earth. I pulled over. "Hey, stranger, need a ride?" I said, trying to lighten the moment. He didn't laugh, didn't smile, just opened the door and climbed in silently. That was the first shiver down my spine. After a month of chatting, I expected warmth, a smile, at least recognition. Instead, there was nothing, just silence. On the way, he suddenly asked me to turn around, saying he wanted to grab alcohol and a blunt. It didn't strike me as strange at first, so I agreed. But as we drove back down that endless dirt road, he casually mentioned his power was out. Something in me froze. No lights, no electricity? He said it as if it didn't matter. I forced a chuckle, asking if he at least had candles. He gave no response. He stared straight ahead, as if I hadn't spoken at all. And then the lie slipped. Earlier, he had told me his kids lived with him, that their mother wasn't in the picture. Now he said they were staying with his mom. Small details, but they cut through my mind like knives. At the store, he pulled his hood tighter, moving quickly like a man hiding from someone or hiding something. Back in the car, he admitted out of nowhere that he had been selling crack to get money for the night. My chest tightened. Why tell me that? What else was he hiding? By the time we left the second store, I wanted nothing more than to escape. When he stepped out, I considered driving off, leaving him behind. But his massive speaker sat in my car like an anchor. If I left with it, he could accuse me of theft. I tried to drag it out of my car. That's when I heard his voice, right behind me. "What are you doing?" The words sliced through me. I spun around, caught like a thief, my blood running cold. Somehow I fumbled a lie, saying I just wanted to move it to the back seat. To my disbelief, he bought it. But my chance at escape was gone. Back in the car, he grew quieter, fidgeting in his pockets, eyes fixed forward. The road around us stretched into darkness. No trailers, no signs of life, just blackness beyond the headlights. I asked when we'd reach his place. He said the address he gave me wasn't real. It was an old business. His actual house didn't show up on Google Maps. That was it. The alarms in my head were deafening. I told him my best friend was waiting for me back in the city, that she knew where I was and expected me soon. I made sure he believed I had already shared his address with her. He was irritated, restless, almost twitching. Then he turned to me with a chilling suggestion. "Can't we just have a little car fun out here? Nobody lives out here. Nobody will see us." The way he said it, flat, pressing, almost hungry, made my skin crawl. I told him no. My friend was waiting. My friend had already called. I wasn't staying. He huffed, slammed the door when he finally got out, and as he leaned down to say something through the window, I slammed my foot on the gas, tires spitting dirt and smoke. I didn't look back. My hands were shaking on the wheel. My chest was tight.
I called everyone I loved, my mom, my sister, my friends, just to hear their voices. I could have been a headline, a missing person, a nameless body in the woods. Later, at home, I searched the address he gave me. 2 miles down, at the end of that dead road, was a single house. Abandoned, windows boarded, doors gone, for sale for years. My friend said what I already knew in my gut. He wanted to get me there, alone, trapped, forgotten. That night carved a promise into me. Never again, never Craigslist, never the dark roads outside the city. Because some people don't want to meet you. They want to own you, to silence you, to leave you where no one will ever find you. And sometimes the scariest part is knowing you almost let them.
Some stories don't fade with time. They attach themselves to you, coil around your memory, and wait in the dark corners of your mind. This one technically isn't mine. It belongs to my mother. But I was there too. I was only 4 months old, too young to form memories. And yet, because of how many times she's told it, because of the way her voice still trembles when she gets to certain parts, I can see it all in my head, as if I had been awake and aware that night. It was 1994. My parents were barely scraping by, trying to hold their lives together under the crushing weight of bills and endless work. My father often came home late, exhausted from long shifts. My mother spent her days alone with me in a small, drafty house that seemed to echo with silence when the sun went down. That particular Wednesday had been like any other. My mom went through the routine of caring for me, feeding, changing, rocking me back and forth until her arms ached. By evening, she was running on fumes. The laundry still needed to be brought in from the outside line, the kitchen was a mess, and I was fussy. She was worn out, longing for the moment my dad would finally come home so she could close her eyes and breathe. But instead of my father's keys jingling in the lock, there came a knock at the door. It was 9 p.m., a believable time for my dad to be arriving late from work. My mom barely thought twice. She placed me in the bassinet in the living room and went to the door, too drained to even glance through the window. She unlocked it, pulled it open, and froze. The man standing there was not my father. He was a stranger, about 5'9" or 5'10", slender, with dark hair and darker eyes. His clothes weren't filthy, but they looked worn, wrinkled, like he'd slept in them. He gave a faint smile, thin, awkward, and said in a calm, practiced voice, "Hey, my car broke down just up the road. Do you mind if I use your phone?" On the surface, the request was harmless, but something in his tone wasn't right. My mother would later say it was too smooth, too casual, as though he'd rehearsed the line again and again. Something about him made her stomach twist, but she was caught off guard, running on exhaustion, and out of reflex, she stepped back, gesturing to the hallway phone just inside. "Yeah, sure, the phone's right there." But instead of stopping at the phone, the man stepped into the house, past the phone, past the table, deeper, closer to my mother. That's when the dread truly hit her. He wasn't looking for a phone, he was looking at her. She forced herself to sound calm, pointing to the phone again, trying to keep her voice steady. "You can use it here." The man tilted his head to the side, watching her. His faint smile warped into something darker, something predatory. So she lied. "My husband is in the shower. He'll be out any minute." Silence stretched. His eyes studied her. Then he spoke again, voice flat, certain. "I don't hear a shower running. I think you're home alone." The air went ice cold. Her chest tightened, her blood roared in her ears. She thought of me, lying helpless in the bassinet just feet away. Her mind raced. Grab the baby, run to the bathroom, lock the door, throw me out the window if she had to, and scream for help. But no, the night outside was still, empty. Who would come? Who would hear? And then something shifted. A growl, low, guttural, rolling out of the kitchen like thunder. It made the walls seem to tremble. From the shadows stepped Pride, our 2-year-old Doberman. She was massive to my mother in that moment, a wall of muscle and teeth. Her body was rigid, ears flat, eyes burning with a focus my mother had never seen before. She wasn't barking. She wasn't moving. She was waiting. The man froze. The mask of confidence slipped from his face. My mother's voice was no longer trembling when she spoke again. "You need to leave, now." Her hand moved closer to Pride's back, a silent signal. The stranger's eyes flicked to the dog, to the teeth glistening in the dim light. His smirk was gone. Step by step, he backed toward the door. And then, without a word, he was gone. The door closed. My mother locked it, her hands shaking violently, and collapsed against the wall, tears flooding her eyes. Her heart felt like it was breaking through her chest. She rushed to me, scooped me into her arms, and held me so tightly that I squirmed against her grip. She whispered over and over, half to me, half to herself, "You're safe, you're safe, you're safe." When my father came home 20 minutes later, she was still trembling. He searched the yard, the street, even walked down the road looking for a broken-down car. There was nothing. The road was empty, silent. There had never been a car. There had never been a stranger in need of help. Just a predator. One who had chosen his house carefully. One who had almost succeeded. The police were called, but there was no trace of him. No one matching the description was ever found. My mother never saw him again. But that didn't mean the fear left. For years, she checked the locks again and again before bed. Sometimes 3 times, sometimes 4. Pride was never allowed to sleep anywhere except right beside my parents. Because my mom knew. She knew how close it had come. Pride lived to be 13 years old. She had the warmest bed, the best food, endless love and attention. She was treated like royalty every single day of her life. Because my mother never forgot. She never forgot that when she was vulnerable, when she was paralyzed with fear, it wasn't chance or luck, it was pride. Even now, decades later, when the house creaks late at night and the wind pushes against the windows, I sometimes imagine what would have happened if Pride hadn't been there, what that stranger might have done. And it chills me to the bone.